Hey, you're listening to 101 Part-Time Jobs with me, Giles Bidder. I speak to Jim Suptic from the Get Up Kids on today's episode, and I'm not exaggerating when I say the Get Up Kids are one of my favourite bands of all time. They were kind of one of those, them bands for me. I made a risky purchase of On a Wire at Virgin Megastores when I was 12 or 13, and I think it must have been the first indie rock band I think I listened to. So I'm feeling pretty happy with myself that I didn't go complete stan on Jim Suptic right here. Let it be known that the Get Up Kids have just started a new Patreon. If you want to support them directly, no middle person, you're a fan of the Get Up Kids and you want them to keep on releasing records that you love, now's the time to get involved in something like that. Thank you so much for listening. As always, if you like these episodes, I implore you, please tell your friends. Let them know that you're listening to the most awesome music podcast, interview podcast there is. This is the only podcast in the world where you get to hear your favourite bands talk about where and when they were, when they decided, for better or worse, that they were going to try and play music full time. Text your friend right now. Text them, I'm listening to Giles Bidder. Speak to one of the singers in the Get Up Kids. It's fucking top-notch journalism, good shit right here, and you need to listen to it. I'll give you that one for free. East London's Signature Brew have been brewing music-inspired beers since 2011. They've made beers with Mastodon and Idols and Sports Team and The Darkness and a whole bunch of other bands. You can make an order at signaturebrew.co.uk to get a bunch of beers delivered to your house, and with the voucher code 101podcast, you can get 10% off that order. All right, here's Jim from the Get Up Kids. Don't forget to leave a shit-hot review. Cheers!
I haven't learned what my true skill sets are. You know, when you've been in a band for 20 years and you apply for some job, it's like, well, what am I good at? I know how to tune a guitar, but there's not very many real world jobs that other than guitar tech, I guess.
When you have applied for those jobs, what kind of route have you taken? Have you tried to like blag it? Have you been like real honest about that fact, or?
Well, honestly, I haven't really had to do that too much. I went back to college, university, as you say, and I have a degree, Bachelor of Science in Geology.
Awesome.
And so I was working for the USGS for a hot minute. And I'm not sure. I mean, I think I used, just like good at meeting new people kind of thing, having to work with people who are different. And, I think that's really important in any job. Like if you could have the best job in the world, but if your manager's an idiot or you work with people you hate, it doesn't matter what you do, you're going to hate it. Like I've had jobs that sucked, but I had fun because the people I worked with made it bearable.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's funny. One of my friends tweeted this. A lot of, quote unquote, normal jobs will spend, so much of the time trying to convince you that you're having a good time and none of the time actually helping you feel good.
Yeah. I've worked a couple jobs where they like very, very, very large corporations that make you feel you're part of the team and all these things at 5 a.m, like team meetings. And it's just like, it's all bullshit. You're just a cog in the capitalist machine, but you got to put food on the table.
I got into the Get Up Kids. The first record I got was On a Wire.
That's an interesting record to start on.
I got into it because my older brother had a massive Reading and Leeds poster on his bedroom wall. And you were on the bill for that year. It must have been 2001 or 2.
Yeah, we played, I think we've done Reading 3 times. We played 1 year on the stage with Graham Coxon from Blur. And that was really awesome. And we were playing foosball, and he picked up our foosball off the ground and handed it to us because it had like flown off the foosball table. And I was sort of speechless. Like there's this Graham Coxon handed me a foosball. Anyway, that was a cool memory. But yeah, 2000. I think we played 1 year with like at the drive-in played, and I don't know. And then when we kind of got back together, we played. Good times.
It's kind of funny. We just had that tiny chat about working at a company that tries to make you feel good, because a few years ago I got a job at Festival Republic, which now owns Reading, and I got into that job thinking this is going to be awesome. And
in music there's sort of like I have these memories when I was young, like the first time I got dropped off at a concert without my parents, just our friends. And we saw Helmet and the Jesus Lizard and Therapy. I remember Therapy. They're like an Irish punk
Yeah.
band. Yeah. And was in the mosh pit. Like it was insane. And it was like this magical thing. Like when the roadie came out and was like testing the guitar. And it's just like that magical feeling of like, I'll never forget that. And then once you do it for a living and you realize, oh, backstage, it sucks. It's not some magical place. The curtain's torn away. And then it's kind of sad in a way that magic, every now and again, that magic still happens, but it is kind of that lost thing. Once you do something for a living and you see how the sausage is made, right? Then it don't know if you still want to eat rock and roll.
That makes me think so many things, but I think a lot of people, there was that Stereogum article that came out a couple of years ago about you guys and the Promise Ring and bands from that kind of time. People do look back with rosy glasses around that time, don't they?
I always try to say this to my children, but it's like the good old days are right now. You just don't appreciate it. Like me eating ramen noodles every night, selling CDs to pay my rent, but I was touring and going to Europe, it was like 97, 98, doing like, I'm 20 years old. So it is like you don't know any better, sleeping on dirty floors, sleeping in squats in Switzerland. And it's like, and I look back now fondly, probably got scabies or something, but
I know I certainly went through my, on a much, much lesser level, I went through my period of time where after a couple of years, I was like, this is making me ill.
It's a young man's game, or gals, being in a rock and roll band,
Of course, you lasted a long time. You're still doing it. You had the break, but you've stood the test of time, truly.
Yeah, we've been we've been lucky, and it's a weird thing. Our band, we never became like this massive band. We always sort of just, I always compare it to like a AAA baseball player in American baseball, where, yeah, we got called up to the major leagues a few times and it was cool, but we were always like a working band. But the problem with that is, to be a working band, you have to work all the time. And the older you get, starting families, getting married, being gone 9 months out of the year, it just doesn't work well if you want to have a healthy family. U2 and Foo Fighters can take their kids on the road with them and fly in private jets, but when you're in a bandwagon playing clubs, it's just not a possibility. So you kind of have to change your priorities. But we've been lucky that we still can do it. It would be impossible for us to be a 9-month on the road type band nowadays. Impossible really now, but if COVID wasn't happening, it still wouldn't be a possibility.
How did you navigate that from, say from early 2000s onwards? I suppose, was there a moment where you realized, you couldn't do the 20-year-old thing anymore?
Yeah. Well, the Get Up Kids ended in 2004 or 5. We broke up, using air quotations, but we probably should have just taken a break. We were all we'd been touring 9 months out of the year for a decade. And I think it just finally took its toll on all of us. And that why when the Get Up Kids got back together, I was very sure that I was going to go back to college. Like when we took a break again, and Rob, our bass player, was touring with Spoon at the time. And so he was kind of really busy because they had just put out a new record. I said, you know what, I'm going back to school. And I'm an art school dropout. And I thought about going back to art school, but ultimately I decided on a science degree. So I would be able to get a job outside the music world, sort of like a safety net, just in case. Because it gets harder and harder every year the older you get. And yeah, we're not Foo Fighters. That would be awesome. I'd love to be a multimillionaire, but I'm a working musician.
This is what this show celebrates. It's the fact that there are all these, I mean, everyone's had a different story. Everyone's had a different path to balancing themselves, to help themselves float, basically.
You gotta be really flexible. It's like the gig economy, you can't be afraid to do things. Like there's no rules in rock and roll anymore. Not that there ever should have been, but for example, Get Up Kids, we're going to do a Patreon.
Cool.
And we're right now kind of filming stuff, recording stuff content wise. And that's something I think we really just never thought of, or it was just like, is this cool? Is this something we want to do? And now it's just kind of the new normal. And it's like with COVID, it's sort of made just not artists, all artists, and like kind of rethink how they do things and how can we sustain a living in an era where, obviously you can't tour, but beyond that, you're not selling records. I think I heard that in the United States, the Taylor Swift Folklore album, which was released, in October, was the first record to sell 1 million copies in the United States. So it's like, wow, the golden age of record sales is gone. And with, streaming services, just not, I mean, it's better than nothing, but it's definitely a very small amount of money compared to an actual physical record sale. You got to reevaluate things, and but that's okay. And it's kind of helped our band run smoother, like almost like, which we've always looked at it as a business once we had to, but I think we've looked at it as a business way more than we ever have, just because we're trying to stay afloat in these crazy times.
That's got to be the smart thing to do, because you see so many bands completely disavow themselves from any kind of, business perception. And as much as that's, would be a nice thing to do, it doesn't work.
And yeah, that's how you get screwed over. And what's funny is the young bands embrace it. Like you ask an older band, I don't want to say I'm that old because we're not that old, but we started before the age of social media. Like MySpace was sort of coming about right as we kind of ended in the mid 2000s. So I think it's just in general, younger people are going to embrace new technologies and try new things easier than you're sort of stuck in your ways. So I think this time has forced us not to be stuck in our ways and embrace new technologies and things like that.
I can't help but feel that that's always going to be the smarter thing to do, because maybe you don't like the idea of TikTok or Instagram, even Twitter, even, when it first came around. And at some point you have to be like, how can we use this for our vision?
For sure. It's, I mean, in any business, if you don't evolve and change, you're going to fail, and no one wants to be called a dinosaur, especially in rock and roll music.
I mean, it's funny. Most people I speak to on this podcast, started in the early 2000s. So they had to kind of navigate from MySpace. I think many bands, so many bands when they started, MySpace was the way to be in a band. You get a profile name on there before you have a band practice.
Yeah, we sort of started at the end of what was kind of the golden age, where bands were on their first record signing like $1 million publishing deals, like things that are like absurd now. But we thought it would be absurd to ever sign to a label and give them a portion of your touring income and merchandise income. Like that was unheard of. But now, I mean, if you want to sign to a major label, that's good luck doing that without signing those things or, part of that away.
What stories do you have about, labels? I read an interview with Joe Sib from Side One Dummy. I think it was Side One Dummy, who said no to the Get Up Kids, but then later on was like, I'm an idiot for doing that.
Yeah. Someone sent me that. I never talked to the gentleman, so I don't know, but there were probably a lot of labels, that heard our band and thought we were terrible or whatever. But
idiots.
Yeah, I mean, we got courted a lot. Like we sent out a demo, which was basically the Woodson EP, our first Sonnet thing we put out. And we just sent it to record labels. Like, we're a bunch of kids in the middle of America. Like, I guess we found addresses for record labels and just mailed them cassettes. And crazy enough, in the first week we sent it out, we got a phone call from Slash Records, which is a major label, and a guy who I'm still friendly with flew out to see us in Kansas City, and like took us out to dinner, and I drank underage. It was like the first time I like, we just ordered beer, and I was like 19, which I mean sounds silly in the UK obviously, but in America, you know, you got to be 21. And so we were like, hell yeah. Like they didn't even card us. That was our first paid dinner. We ended up obviously not signing with them, and then we had signed a deal with Doghouse. But yeah, I mean, we almost signed to Sub Pop.
When? What year?
So this would have been after 4 Minute Mile. We were getting courted by a lot of labels, and we really hated our Doghouse contract. Basically, the problem with Doghouse is that it was kind of like we had signed a major label contract on an indie label. You know, like now our like Polyvinyl, it's like 50-50. You know, it's just like a partnership kind of thing, which is what, if you're on an independent label, really, come on. Like that's like the merge record model.
Yeah.
So we're like, you know what, if we're going to have a major label contract, let's just sign, you know, to a major label. Yeah, my friend Jason Reynolds, who was an A&R guy there. I mean, we're friends with him now. We didn't know him at the time, but he was courting our band, and we, you know, went to Sub Pop offices, met Jonathan Podeman, you know, one of the founders. And we were like, I mean, you have to understand, for a bunch of kids from the Midwest, you never imagined our band would do anything to like the label of Nirvana and these bands that we all grew up with. And at the time, I mean, Sunny Day Real Estate was like the last kind of bigger thing they had done. Like they were kind of in a down period. And we finally got the contract, and I have a Sub Pop watch. Like we were like, that was given to us. And honestly, the deal was just like another major label contract. And it just, we're like, well, what are we doing? Why are we, you know, it just didn't make sense. Then we almost did sign to a major label, but that was probably one of the closest we were to signing. Like we actually had the contract and didn't sign it.
What was that like, being in front of it and then saying, actually, no?
You know, we just knew it wasn't worth it. And we had a like lawyers, and we had already learned from a mistake of signing, you know, at the time we signed the Doghouse contract, we just wanted someone to put out our music, and like didn't care. I think a lot of young bands are like that, right?
Yeah, anyone would be, yeah.
And at the time, you know, and we knew what it was. We knew like, this is like a major label contract where we're not getting a big advance or anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And yeah, it just didn't work out. We got flown out to LA by Geffen, met the Geffen people. Mojo Records, though, is who we did almost sign with, which I think we've talked about this in other platforms, and I've kind of seen like sometimes the timeline's wrong on these things, but that was another thing where we had the contract done. So Sub Pop and Mojo, and yeah, it just wasn't a very good deal. And Rich Egan, ultimately why we signed to Vagrant, they gave us a really good, fair deal. And we kind of knew even if we sold less records on Vagrant, we'd end up making more money based on how good the deal was. And that was our ultimate decision. I don't think we got like some huge advance or anything from Vagrant. It was just like record sales, like the percentage we would make was really good. And we owned 51% of our masters. And when you sign to a major label, you sign away your masters. So basically we kept full control. And you have to remember, at the time, Vagrant was not what people think of Vagrant Records. You know, they had put out like a face-to-face something or other, like because Rich Egan managed face-to-face, and I think they put something for them out, and they just had a few releases. We just believed in them that they had the power and they were smart, and you know, and ultimately that label took off. Some of it, you could say a lot of it or some of it, but definitely signing us was a big part of them getting other bands. Like we were the ones who took the risk. And a lot of other bands who I'm friends with and would probably agree, you know, they really benefited from things that we didn't benefit from because we were sort of the guinea pigs, if you will.
Chris Conley said that, he, saves the day. We're interested because Get Up Kids.
And there you go. There's the story.
When you signed that, did, as friends, as a collective, did you look at each other and be like, okay, now we're really doing this? Did it change anything?
Not really. You have to understand, like, after 4 Minute Mile, we built a really, like, we were doing well. I didn't have, like, I officially didn't have another job. Like, we were starting to tour, and I think the interest in our band wasn't from just our demo anymore. It's because we were playing Los Angeles and 400 kids are coming out to see our band, and labels are taking, like, who is this band? And it was all word of mouth, like that kind of emo scene, punk scene was just like really starting to happen. And, like the band, like Jimmy Eat World, Promise Ring, all these bands we were touring with, we kind of all saw, like, you could see this happening. And it's sort of like when grunge happened in the States, it's like, it was like once one hit, then it was like a feeding frenzy. And we were sort of in that first wave, and ultimately, which turned into, the Fall Out Boys, My Chemical Romance, where it truly peaked. But yeah, it was a weird time.
Weird in the sense you were kind of watching it.
You kind of don't see it. Like, even just like the scene itself, I think it's hard to see it when you're in the middle of it. And then when you step back, then it all makes sense. Kind of like as the story's unfolding, you kind of, and you're just in the story. But of course, hindsight's 2020, right? So it's like, oh, of course, that's why we did this. But you said, we had no idea. I knew we didn't know before we went and made Something at Home about what it was going to do, or what we didn't think this will be a gold record, or this will be not that it was, but it did pretty well. But I don't think we knew anything other. I mean, we were still pretty broke. Even though I was lucky enough that I didn't have another job, but we slept on our friend Kevin Kusatsu's floor, and he had 5 roommates or something. We were like living in this house in LA and driving. It was insane. It was nutty.
Living in LA?
Yeah, we lived in LA for almost 2 months making that record, I think.
Something to write home about.
Mm-hmm. And we recorded at Mad Hatter Studio, which is Chick Corea's studio. I think maybe Blink-182 made a record there, and I can't remember. I mean, there were some pretty big records. It was like in Silver Lake, Echo Park area. But I don't think, that was like the first time of us really making a record. 4 Minute Mile was recorded in 2.5 days because, wow. It's just absurd. And so this, I don't think, maybe we had too much time. We kind of just didn't know. And sometimes when you don't know any better, that's when cool things happen, I guess.
It's actually kind of interesting looking back, because Something to Write Home About still has the noise floor of 4 Minute Mile. Still, it still has that rattle about it.
It's funny. We were relearning a couple songs from it, and it's some of it I think some of the drums sounded really good. It's just some of the things we're playing, like, we would never think to do that now. So it's almost like when you haven't heard a song in a while or played it, you're listening to it like it's somebody else's song. Like where I completely forgot what I was playing. It's like, why did I do that? like I would never do that. I would do. I don't know. It was cracking me up. I remember flying home, and I was listening to it on headphones, like on the flight back. And I knew, for whatever the genre was, I think I feel like we made a really good record. I think Jimmy Eat World had just made Clarity, and that record, that's like major label money. That record sounds incredible, and it was like, that was like the bar, like, wow. And they had a lot of more money, I think, and time to make that record, but it's like, crap, we got to make something as good as this, right? Like this sounds amazing. So I don't know if we achieved that, but I think we knew it was, like, for the time and the scene, a good record, if that makes sense.
It's actually kind of funny. Like, say you and Jimmy Eat World, your bands that would have, you'd be on the same bill around that period of time.
Yeah, we toured together. It's really, it's funny. Jimmy Eat World, I was playing in a pop punk band with Matt Pryor, and Jimmy Eat World like jumped on the show. This was when I was in high school. I was 18 or something. Actually, I wasn't 18. I was 17. And I just remember thinking, man, I want to start a band that sounds like that. And then Matt and I, yeah. And the next time they came through, I was in art school at the time, and they all crashed. Like half of them crashed at my apartment, and we became friends and had been friends with those guys since. And I remember thinking, because we were kind of signing this deal, and I didn't know what I was going to do, but all I knew was like, these guys are having so much fun. They're barely a year older than me, and they're on the road touring, and it's like, this is what I want to do. And we all dropped out of school, and the rest is history. Yeah.
Kind of funny with that band, because in a lot of interviews that they've spoken about those early days, it always came across that they had been slogging it for a pretty long time before anything happened.
Yeah. I mean, you got to think like Clarity, like you think even that record, that they were still a club band, that record got them dropped, I think, from Capitol. And then they signed, which is ridiculous now that Capitol they just didn't see like, it's just hard for a band on a major label. Like, and Jimmy Eat World was doing exactly what we were doing, we were playing the same clubs, same scenes, and they were building that fan base too. And I think the label just they were tired of waiting, and then they screwed it, because then the next record was a platinum album, and there you go. The rest is history, right?
So Something to Write Home About came out. How do you remember that, that period of time, when it came out?
It was kind of a slow build, but everything from our band had kind of been a slow build. Like we kept like reaching new plateaus, and then kind of it started peaking. We got a Green Day tour, and we were kind of had toured on it our own. And then after that, we got asked to do a Weezer tour right after that. And we were ready to like start working on the new record, but it's like, it was insane. And that Weezer tour was insane because it was kind of like their first real tour back after a long time. And like every show sold out, like instantly. And we were sort of the flavor of the month band like that. Those two tours back to back, I think, is what took us really to what I would say the next level, where when On a Wire came out, we were playing theaters, and we went from a club band to a theater band, which is a whole change in itself, because you have to kind of rethink how you interact with the crowd, what your stage show is, bringing in lights. It's just it's like, oh, that's when it was like, oh, we're professional now. Like we have to really think about these things, before it was just plug and play, which is punk rock,
Did that change the band dynamic? Was there like an added pressure, or?
I mean, I think after the success of Something to Write Home About, there was a pressure, but I think we just decided we're going to do what we want to do, which is good and bad, I guess. But I don't know. I think it was such a slow progression. Like it sort of was all just kind of step after step, that nothing seemed like it just was all kind of natural.
When you said that, it was like the flavor of the month kind of thing, did you laugh about that at the time? You were aware of that?
I won't name names, but there is a funny story that is true, that we had, maybe the names are out there, but this is a true story. We had just walked off stage, and we played like the Bill Graham Civic Arena in front of like thousands of people. This was on the Weezer tour. And I remember playing like Mass Pike, and the crowd just going insane. Like, it's like 5,000 people. It was like crazy. And this guy like kicks open our dressing room, and we had just played. And he's like, "The deal's done, fellas. Let's get this signed." Like something out of a fucking movie, and we're just, and it's, I don't know, like just talking to us like we are like some young, like at that point, we've done it. We've toured Japan and Europe and all over, and had a successful record. So we were just laughing. And then we just said $1 million. And the guy's like looking at us like we're insane, and go, "You want to sign our band? $1 million." There's more to that, and that person did ended up getting involved with Vagrant Records in a crazy way, and it's like, I don't know. It's a true story. That's just like, that's major label stuff there, man. Yeah, I don't think he understand how insulting he was to us. Like, this is like, we always joke, like, if your record came out on an indie label, it's just a demo. Unless it's on a major label, then it's not a real record. Those are just, we just put out a bunch of demos. Funny enough, now we're like, our releases are on major labels. Vagrant got bought by Interscope. Now BMG owns it. And we've only signed to a major label. Actually, we have all these releases on major labels now, but the band itself has only signed to one major label, and that was JVC in Japan. That's the only actual major label contract we ever signed.
Does that change the deal like now? Do you still get like trickle money?
Oh yeah, I mean, I get BMG, who pays the checks for Get Up Kids royalties, and I can tell you, I don't think they like our record deal. Like we had to go back and they like prove, no, this is our rate and this is what you have to pay us. So they definitely don't like it. I mean, I don't think at this point really they care too much. We're a small fish in a big pond, but it is funny that we had to get our manager to like send a copy of the contract. Like, no, this is it. This is their royalty rate.
...2002 On a Wire. What was like home life for you like around then?
That's definitely a time where a lot of things were changing. Matt was married. I got married in 2002, bought my first house. We had money. Our band we were never millionaires, but that was like, you have to understand, to be like 23 and making really good money, and all your friends are still eating ramen and a lot of them are still in school. It was crazy. It was a crazy time. Like, just going out every night. I mean, I had no kids. My house was like the party house, going to bars every night, just buying drinks for everybody. It was one of those crazy scenes. And ironically, we weren't rolling in money, but for a 22, 23-year-old, it was like, I might as well have been millions of dollars.
Buying a house is, by today's standards, insane.
Yeah. It's funny that I mentioned this. I literally found out right before, because I'm renting a house right now. I was buying my grandmother's house. So it's like, even getting in this house is because it was my grandma's. I just found out I got the home loan, which has been a pain in the butt when you're self-employed. And I thought it should have been just an easy slam dunk thing. But then because of COVID, they're really scrutinizing anybody who owns a small business, their income right now, because so many things are failing, which I understand, but it's been jumping through hoops. So yeah.
In 2002, you could be like, go to the bank and you're like, yeah, I'm in a bed.
It was not even my income, just they were giving loans to anybody, obviously, which is why
obviously, I mean, 2004, you took the break, but were you kind of, was there a strain at that point?
When Get Up Kids had a big stopping point. Yeah, there was like a definite strain in the band. Like, I've said this to the band, and I think it was fairly obvious with my attitude. If the Get Up Kids weren't so successful and making money, I would have quit before Guilt Show. Like, I was really unhappy, and these things have been said, so it's not too much new news, but like, I didn't have a song I sang on Guilt Show, and I had written all these songs, and even one of the songs our manager at the time wanted as like the single. So, and it didn't make the record. So I just sort of felt like, what am I doing? And then ultimately Matt, he didn't want to tour. He was done. And I think we just needed somebody to be like, look, guys, we need to discuss the future. We need to take a break. Like, we just needed a break. We needed a break and a restructuring of of how we're making records and things like that. Cause nobody wants it to be like, okay, I have to have my 4 songs. And then, cause then that's when bands start breaking up.
Yeah.
And ultimately we went back to the way of like, just like how our band was structured before, like, sometimes I would just bring a song in and here's the song, like Campfire, Kansas. Hey guys, here's the song. And they just play over it. And then sometimes, Rob has a cool bass line or something, so it's kind of makes it complicated, like royalties or publishing or things like that of like who did what, and so now it's just easier to just, this is the REM model, which is why REM I think stayed a band for so long, is like, if I bring it to the band, it's the band song and I have to say, okay, and if they wanted like this part's stupid, I have to not, which has been hard for me, but that's why, I have had other bands and other outlets after Get Up Kids where I didn't have to listen to their opinions, but ultimately it's a good thing. It's a good, because I think at the end of the day, we just want to make the best music we can. And it's cool because a lot of like, sometimes like the Pope brothers are coming at something totally different of how I thought of when I'm bringing a song in. And sometimes it doesn't work. And sometimes it makes it a million times better.
When you decided to have that break, that must have taken a lot of guts, first of all.
Yeah. I kind of didn't know, I started a new band called Blackpool Lights. Never been to Blackpool though. I need to go see the lights of Blackpool. We have a thing in Kansas City called the Plaza Lights, which every Christmas they turn the lights on a outdoor shopping mall that was built in the 1920s. It's actually one of the first technical malls in the United States. And it's all, it's modeled after Seville, Spain. So if you go, which is like a sister city, I guess, of Kansas City. In Kansas City, it's when you were too cool or had a successful band or something, you left Kansas City. And for many years, a lot of great artists from Kansas City just left because it was, it was easier, either visual art or music or whatever. It was easier to go to Chicago. Like that's where everyone went. If you're from a mid-sized city in the middle of America, you go to Chicago or you go to Brooklyn or LA. And what we're seeing now is people are staying because cost of living's great and just like cool, like there's like incredible restaurants in Kansas City right now, really great artists. And, you don't, it's like, I think a lot of people are coming to a realization, like I can't afford Los Angeles. I can't afford San Francisco, and I can do with the internet, with the way the world is, you don't have to be from those places to be successful. So we kind of stayed true to our roots, I guess.
Was that weird in 2004 when you did take a break? Did it feel like losing your job?
You know what it felt like? And it's kind of, I don't know. It's not hard to admit now, but I think at the time it would be very hard to admit. I lost some of my identity, like everyone, if you've ever studied like sociology in school, like they talk about like a master status of sort of like what, people like when people think of me, they think, oh, Jim from the Get Up Kids, Jim's a father, those are like your master status things. And it was sort of taken away from me. Like that was my thing. And now it's gone. So I think that even though I wanted to, I did it to myself in a lot of ways. I was ready. I think, I look back and I think about that time of like, what could we have done different? Like I've said, we just needed a break. But at the same time, I don't like, it's easy to say those things now, but in the heat of the moment, I really kind of disliked the band. Like, and these are my friends, like Rob Pope and I were in first grade together. So these are like my brothers. And I think part of that is part of the problem too, because you're just, I don't know, other than my wife and kids and my immediate family, like my nuclear family, I don't know other human beings as well as I do those guys. But when you do know people that well, every button to push, every, like just, I think I was watching like the Supersonic documentary, the Oasis documentary, and like Liam talking about, I can just look a certain way and Noel will go into a rage. And it's like, I get it, I get that. and I'm in a band with brothers too. So they're their biggest, like they will always stick up for each other no matter what. And they'll also hate each other more than anybody, that's the dynamic. But now one thing that's kind of interesting, it's funny. I've self-reflected on a lot of things, which is probably why our band gets along now. Cause we've all sort of just matured and kind of can see relationships in a different way. But, of the original band, I was the only one who didn't grow up with a brother. I had a sister, and I feel like sometimes I was getting like almost picked on in a cruel way that I think I didn't understand. And it's because I didn't have that competitive sort of dynamic that only brothers have. I always just had a sister, and we were never really competitive. Like once she was in high school, we were just friends. And my brothers are my bandmates, and I've sort of had to learn to accept these kind of things, like that they all sort of just grew up kind of already having this dynamic.
It's funny to see that kind of clarity, isn't it? I'm the youngest, and the more I live on Earth, the more I'm like, yeah, I am the youngest.
Yeah, I'd probably act like the youngest in our band, even though Ryan, our drummer, is the youngest, but it's okay. Be crazy.
I mean, what were you doing in those years? I mean, how long did it take you to,
speaking about a part-time thing, I worked a couple jobs. Like I said, Get Up Kids are always a working band. So if we weren't touring, I had royalty income and things like that, but I needed to work. I started the band Blackpool Lights. We toured, we put out a record. I kind of started this record label with some friends that we put out some cool stuff, but starting a record label in the late 2000s is like the dumbest decision. It'd be like opening a restaurant the day before COVID happened. It just was, people weren't, once again, now it's like, oh, why didn't we do this? Why didn't we do that? That would have made more sense. But we were kind of like working in an old system in the middle of it changing. And so ultimately that's why I think it didn't take off. But, and then I had a kid, and I realized I got to do something, because Blackpool Lights wasn't, we did a couple cool things. We went to Japan and we did a tour with Social Distortion, but it just wasn't, it was like barely minimum wage of what we're making on the road.
Yeah.
So I decided I was going to go back to school, because at that time, I didn't see the Get Up Kids getting back together. And so I got a job at a library, which I'd done before. I worked at a library when I was in art school. And libraries are like the most non-stressful job ever. And I worked at Home Depot, if you can imagine that. And I was just working early in the morning doing like stocking shelves. I hated it. I mean, it was a depressing time. I'm not going to lie. It was like a low point in my adulthood. And I'll never forget, I had toured on this Blackpool Lights. I tried so hard to have these things work out. And Rob was on tour with Spoon, playing a sold out show to like 2,800 people in Kansas City. And, I got on the guest list and I'm watching it. And this is not me like envious or jealous of Rob. Like Rob is very talented, and he earned what he got, like joining, he got in Spoon because he's a badass bass player, that's how he got the job. So good on Rob. But, I'm watching it, and it's just kind of like, what the fuck am I doing with my life? And I had to leave early. I couldn't even stay to say good show at the end, because I had to get home, because I had to be at work at 4 a.m. to go to stock this shit. And so, but it's also a good motivator. I mean, that's why I went back to college later, because like, I'm never doing that again. So
being in a band and like creating your own world, and then other people jumping on it, getting on board with it, and then making money from it. That's like, to come down from that must feel kind of crazy.
Yeah. Well, it's crazy to think like a year earlier, I was like touring Japan and Australia, and now it's 4 a.m. and I'm on this like order picker pulling down 400-pound showers from 30 feet in the air, but sometimes you need to get knocked down in life. It was humbling. I've been there before. I had been young. The difference now is that I had a family, and like, well, this is like real life. This isn't just me doing whatever I want. I can't think that way anymore. So that's what, like, honestly, that's what kept me from getting too depressed about it. Cause it ultimately, it was what it was. And now I have a full-time job and I love it. I work for a nonprofit, with the drummer of Blackpool Lights. He's an amputee, and we help amputees who need prosthetic limbs. And it's been incredible. And we kind of watched this thing grow to this big thing. And so now it's kind of, I uh, I have like a balanced life where I can do this and do some good in the world and still play music, and it's not be all end all, which like, thank God I had this job like now, because I don't know what I'd be doing. I'd be pretty screwed with not being able to tour.
When did the non-for-profit start? Were you one of the first people working there?
So yeah, it was just Billy. He had kind of helped start this in Nashville because he was trying to be like a studio drummer. Actually, this is kind of an interesting story how all this came about. So when Blackpool Lights started, Billy had this issue with his leg and he didn't know what was going on. He had been in a bad car accident like 10 years earlier or something. Well, it turns out it was cancer. He had Ewing sarcoma, and he was getting he was doing chemo as we made that record. So like the drums on the Blackpool Lights debut album, he was going through chemotherapy. And ultimately they told him, like, you can either get your leg amputated or we can try more stuff. But since he was so young and healthy otherwise, that was ultimately decision. And it was like insane. Like, it was a really crazy thing. And we did a benefit show because he has like this fancy robot leg that's like $30,000. Even with insurance, it was all this money. So we did like a benefit concert and raised all this money. And and that was, band breaks up, he's doing his thing, but he was kind of looking for a career change because he had a kid. He was trying to be a studio drummer. Nashville's a crazy place, and this thing kind of happened, and he ended up moving back to Kansas City. I had quit USGS, and because the Get Up Kids were going to tour, and I was looking for a new job, and I kind of was having no luck. But Get Up Kids still wanted to do some touring. Long story short, Billy comes back to town. I kind of like, hey, you need like some part-time help, because I'm really just, I'm not touring all the time right now. And he's like, yeah. So I just basically started working 10 hours a week, kind of helping him, trying to put on events to raise money. And now it's become a full-time job. We have there's another full-time employee besides Billy and I. And like this year, I think we're going to raise over $600,000, which is crazy. Yeah. And we do this big event now that started, like, Billy and I, the first year we did it, it was called Thunder Gong. And it started this because one of Billy's good friends is Jason Sudeikis, and who's from Kansas City. And he's friends with Fred Armisen and Will Forte. Also, we're on Saturday Night Live. They came to Kansas City and we put this show on, and, the drummer Cactus Mosier, he's married to Winona Judd. He's an amputee. He's on our board of directors. So Winona Judd sang. It was like crazy, and it raised like $200,000, which for us was insane at the time. Well, anyway, we've been doing it. This was our 4th year, and we did it online this year and raised, like, it was crazy. And we had Jack Johnson and Ben Harper, but it was crazy. We got Foo Fighters. Sent us they did a song for it. It's like, it's just insane. So it's been neat to watch this thing where we helped. I think the first year I worked there, we helped like 30 people. And this year, I think we're going to help 160 people. And next year, our goal is to help 200 people. So it's been really cool, really fulfilling it's good to know, like, whatever I'm doing, I'm not fracking. You know what I mean? I have this geology degree. It's like,
dude, well done. That's real. That's a real thing.
Yeah. It's a lot of hard work. It's called Steps of Faith Foundation. If anyone's interested listening to check it out and see the work we do. Yeah, it's been crazy. It's been a crazy year. Like, our goal this year was just to stay afloat, and then to have like such a great year of giving. And what we're kind of seeing is that for all the people that are kind of hurting right now, there's a lot of people who did really, really well, like in this, and it's right or wrong, good or bad. But I think the people who are doing really well are feeling really generous. Not that they're feeling guilty, but kind of like they understand how lucky they are in this world climate to be like, I'm blessed. I just have a job right now, on top, like, cause I would be crazy I don't know what I'd be doing. Cause I have a lot of friends who are musicians or our friends who are promoters who own venues. And it's a scary time for everybody. We're booking tours, looking for end of year kind of stuff. And it's like, is that venue going to be open? And that's insane. We had in 1 week, 3 venues had closed that Get Up Kids had played in like the last like couple years, like, and just like that, like, well, like 2 that were just on tour. But then I saw, it was at the Deaf Institute in Manchester. Like they closed, but they're open again now. Good for them. Cause I saw that. I was like, man, this is crazy.
That's a really cool venue, that place.
Yeah. We had a fun show there.
Jim, I mean, it's so awesome to speak with you. I want to do another episode in the future if you're up for that.
I've forgotten more than I remember. I think that really is true. Like people tell me, it's like, I don't even remember. Like all tours start blurring together,
Do you think you tend to remember the bad parts or the good parts?
The further you get away from things, I feel like for me, the more I remember the good things, and the bad things don't seem as bad. I know that's just a way to look at life, right? I mean, you could always look at things. It's the half glass full, right?
Well, you got a new record coming up. How far are you into writing that?
We're doing them in batches. We got 3 kind of sort of getting flushed out. And then we basically took half of our advance. We bought a really nice computer. We bought a bunch of really good mics. So we're really just now starting it. Rob was living in Massachusetts, sold his house and moved back to Kansas. So now we're all here, which has been a long time. So it's been cool where we actually schedule practice. Like before we'd have to like, okay, we're practicing all week. I mean, that's how we wrote Problems, our last record. We kind of had to rush through things. So now we've kind of spent like 4 practices on one song and keep changing it, which is normally not how we work. So it'll be interesting. If we don't want to overthink it, but it has been nice to not feel rushed at all. And honestly, I don't see it coming out soon because like we were talking to Polyvinyl, our record label, and like I guess all the vinyl plants are backed up. And so it's really hard to just get anything out because they had to stop. They had to stop production. They weren't deemed essential. And so all these, it's like a log jam,
Wow.
If you're not touring, then why do we care if the record's out? Like we don't just tour to tour. We want to be promoting something. So we're not rushing to like, we got to get this out so we can get on the road. And it's actually kind of nice to know that it's not a rush to get it done, but it is nice to just be writing again and just playing music. Cause it had been, you forget, we did a show at a distanced show and we did it as a benefit. It was outside and it was to raise money for a venue called Record Bar in Kansas City, who are really good friends who own it. And it was good. We raised some money for them, and it was just, I forgot how good it felt to play a show. It's like, oh, this was not, it was weird. I'm not going to lie. Like people are kind of sitting spread out. But it was something, and something right now is better than nothing.
Jim, thanks so much, man. I really appreciate, you being up for it.
This was fun. I love talking about myself.
So there he is, Jim Suptic of the Get Up Kids. Thank you so much for listening to 101 Part-Time Jobs podcast. If you liked it, do leave a review. Do let your mates know what they're missing. And remind everyone else just how good this Sparrer song is. Ta-ra!
I've been working all day for me mate on the side, running around like a blue-ass fly. I've been working all day for me mate. Every bleeding minute I've been on the go, up and down the ladder like a
This is a Mighty Moon Media podcast.